Now let's get the verdict of Steven Swinford, the Times political editor. Morning.
Good morning.
What reaction are you hearing this morning? How hot are your WhatsApps?
I mean, it is catastrophic, and that is what people are saying. This is bad on whatever way you look at it. This is Manchester. This should be a safe seat. It was the 39th safest seat in the country for Labour, and they've lost here. So if they can lose in Gorton and Denton, the message is they can lose anywhere. And that is panicking Labour MPs. It is concerning ministers, and it is clear that Labour is on a very, very bad trajectory here. But what I'm not hearing is suggestions that anyone's going to go over the top and mount a leadership challenge soon. That doesn't feel like where we are this morning. It feels that people are more kind of reconciled to Keir Starmer not leading the party into the next election and things happening after May. But either way, it is a very grim state of affairs this morning for Labour.
So does that mean nothing's going to get done, that the government is going to be in a state of paralysis until the local elections and then potentially Keir Starmer being ousted?
Look, I think it means that Starmer has to change course if he is to have any hope of survival. So he's going to have to probably shift to the left. It means that those left-wing voices in the party will carry far more weight now. And it also, I mean, you could see things like a shadow cabinet, some kind of reshuffle to balance the cabinet, to have more left-wing voices in it. But either way, I think what it shows is this broader strategy of, as Lucy Powell, the deputy leader, put it this morning, we can't out-reform reform. But Labour has been doing that on migration and on other issues. It has been trying to appeal to all sides. And that approach is clearly costing the party dearly. It is struggling to hold together this sandcastle coalition of voters that it won at the last election. And that's what we've seen in Gorton and Denton. And the read across is that could now happen across the country in different areas.
So how does the Labour Party appeal to all sides? Because there is suggestions today that Labour needs to move more to the left to bring in those voters that have gone to the Greens. But then they also don't want to lose those voters that are wanting to go towards reform when they've moved slightly to the right. So realistically, what do they do?
It can't appeal to all sides. And I think the fundamental issue here is Keir Starmer is extremely unpopular. Let's just make that very, very clear. The collapse in his popularity ratings is unlike anything that we have seen. And I think there are going to be further questions over his judgment this week. They managed expectations terribly for this by-election. They were suggesting that they were going to win it. I was getting those briefings repeatedly all week. They said it's really good on the ground. Keir Starmer went and visited it himself. He obviously blocked Andy Burnham from standing, and they seemed to do this extraordinary campaign where they pretended that the Greens didn't exist. But this was, as Keir Starmer put it, a straight fight between Reform and Labour. Well, that palpably was not true when he said it, and it is obviously less true this morning when we see the Greens having won. So look, I imagine we will be hearing from Keir Starmer shortly. He is going to make the point, argue that Zach Polanski cannot win a general election, and he's going to compare him to George Galloway, who obviously had breakthroughs in midterm by-elections that he failed to capitalise on more broadly. But my concern would be that Zach Polanski here is, and his candidate, Anna Simpson, who's now the MP for Gorton and Denton, were essentially like winning over voters on two fronts. One, they were arguing that they are the party of the working classes. They were, saying that billionaires are profiting at the expense of working class voters. And two, obviously the Gaza issue, which is a big issue in many Labour seats. They just appeal very hard to those people. So that is a real problem. And the other thing I would add further, don't underestimate what Reform has achieved here either. So Reform may not have won the seat, but they've got 29% in what was a Labour-safe stronghold in Manchester. Now that tells you something very big is going on. And the next election will still be defined by parties' responses to Reform and who can win that mantle of being the party to stop Reform. And what this tells us is that Labour is not that party.
What about the Conservatives? 706 votes and losing their deposit.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very bad night for the Conservatives. They are not even being talked of as a story. They were never expected to do anything. But clearly there is a place for, a right-wing political party to win votes, as we have seen from Reform. And I think one of the struggles the Conservatives has got is Kemi Badenoch is winning plaudits from colleagues for taking the fight to Starmer, doing a lot better. There is signs of an uptick in her personal approval ratings, but none of that is cutting through in the national polls. They are still languishing. And that is the problem, that Reform is basically eating their breakfast, lunch and dinner. And the only way back for them is through those reform voters. And at the moment, they are still very much with reform.
Stephen, it's always good to get your analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Steven Swinford there, the Times political editor.
Speaking to the people who voted in this by-election, what's your take on the result?
Yeah, it's been a big one, Ed, and it's. I think the implications of it are still sort of unfolding throughout the course of the day. I'm stood just outside the press conference that Zach Polanski and Hannah Spencer are giving. They're in the room just behind me, still answering questions from the media. I was in there a few moments ago, and that theme of sort of the Greens triumphing over division is what they're really zeroing in on in the aftermath of their really quite, seismic victory in Gorton and Denton. They're very much talking about the divisive nature of the campaign. A couple of minutes ago, Zach Polanski was saying he hopes that there's time for reflection from the Labour Party, among others, as to how they conducted their campaign. Of course, let's not forget, the Labour Party teed this up as Labour are the only ones who can beat Reform UK. That has been proved to be well and truly wrong. And that is something that the Green Party leadership, and indeed their brand new MP, who's in the room behind me just now as well, something that they're really looking to capitalise on and build on going forward from here. So they're very much kind of zooming in on that division message and saying the Greens are the party of unity and to unify people. And I do wonder if that is something of a consideration for the Prime Minister this morning as to what the left side of British politics looks like today, and whether Sir Keir Starmer is anywhere close to being the leader or figurehead of that.
And talking of reform, they've been bigging up the issue of electoral fraud. Is that something that you're hearing from voters as a concern? It struck me that Hannah Spencer's speech was very much addressing that point.
Yeah, I feel like on the voter, I think it's worthy of consideration, definitely, these concerns that were raised by this monitoring group late last night when polls had closed, but I have to say were rebuffed pretty quickly by officials at Manchester City Council who were charged with overseeing this election. I think it's something to consider for sure. I wonder if there is something of a culture war being built around that as a particular issue in this particular constituency. I think when we look at the kind of data on what that group of observers were pointing to, I don't think it's changed the outcome of this election, but of course it's cause for concern and cause for consideration in terms of how this by-election was conducted and the protocols and procedures around it. I think one of the things about this, though... Oh, go on, Ed.
Well, talking about how you changed the result, having cut you off from what was probably a great point, is do you get a sense that Andy Burnham might have changed the result for Labour?
Yeah, everyone I speak to this morning says if Andy Burnham had if Andy Burnham had run, he would have won. And that includes the Greens, by the way. Zach Polanski's been quite open. He was on with us on Times Radio Breakfast this morning. And he said when he heard that Burnham had been blocked, he cheered. He kind of punched the air. He was celebrating because it did make life easier. The consideration from anyone you speak to, including Reform UK, was that Andy Burnham was going to be more difficult to beat. It's obviously difficult to kind of pursue that thought experiment much further than that, but there is definitely consensus that he would have given the Greens, in this case, Reform UK as well, a run for their money, given his local connections and the real level of affection that people have for him here. We spoke to a friend of his on Times Radio Breakfast this morning, Sacha Lord, who actually said that Burnham does a really good job of carving out his niche as, well, colloquially, the King of the North, but somebody who represents local people in this area in a way that keeps him distinct from the slightly tarnished Labour brand. And that is something that Burnham prides himself on, working with people in the area, whatever party they're from, and really advancing the cause of people in Greater Manchester. And so I think that would have played extremely well in this particular by-election.
Thank you so much. That's Times Radio's Calum Macdonald, who has been in the Gorton and Denton by-election this morning, been in Gorton and Denton following the by-election this morning, speaking to us from a busy dual carriageway. That's the dedication that Calum shows to Times Radio. Eleanor from Cardiff says, could you please explain to your less trendy listeners what dog whistling is? Dog whistle politics is all about the fact that the human ear can't hear the dog whistle, so you can say things and hint at things about what might have affected the by-election result without being explicit about it, because you can't be explicit about it in polite company. That's what dog whistle politics is all about.